Micro-scale false flags and deniable targeting, operational indicators and counter-threat strategies. In today's world, not all threats look like enemies in uniform. Some arrive quietly through strange coincidences, confusing behavior, or emotional traps. These are called micro-scale false flags. They're small, sneaky operations meant to make someone look guilty, unstable, or dangerous when they're not. These tactics are often used to provoke reactions, hide who's really responsible, and make it hard to trace the truth. I've seen these tactics used against good people, activists, whistleblowers, even animal rescuers. And I've seen how dangerous they can become if we don't know how to spot them. That's why I'm speaking today, not just as someone with experience in threat response, but as someone who cares deeply about protecting others. Whether you're a student, a soldier, or a civilian, you deserve to understand how these tactics work and how to defend yourself. Pattern recognition. Watch for echoes. When different people say the same strange things, act in similar ways, or show up at odd times, it might not be random. These patterns can be signs of coordination. Outsourced actors, people hired or manipulated to provoke, often follow scripts. If you notice repeated phrases, timing, or setups, start a log. Write down what happened, when, and who was involved. Over time, you'll see the pattern. That's your first clue. Implausible behavior. Ask who benefits. Sometimes people act in ways that don't make sense, like helping you one day and sabotaging you the next. Or they might say things that don't match their values. These contradictions can be signs of pressure, manipulation, or hidden agendas. Always ask, who benefits from this? If someone's actions help a third party, especially one with power or money, it's worth investigating. Emotional entrapment. Don't take the bait. False flag operations often try to make you angry, scared, or confused. They want you to react so they can record it, twist it, or use it against you. This is called emotional entrapment. The best defense is awareness. When something feels off, pause. Take a breath. Write down your thoughts. Talk to someone you trust. Your calm is your shield. Digital defense. Use your tools. Technology is part of the battlefield. Spoofed accounts, strange app behavior, and metadata glitches can be signs of surveillance or manipulation. That's why tools like NetGuard, ADB, Wireshark, and App Manager matter. They help you monitor your device, remove unsafe apps, and protect your privacy. Learn how to use them. Treat your phone like a perimeter. Guard it like you would a base. Controlled opposition. Stay true to your mission. Not everyone who seems helpful is on your side. Some people are placed near you to confuse your message, slow you down, or make you doubt yourself. This is called controlled opposition. To counter it, stay focused. Write down your goals. Test your allies over time. Ask, are they helping me grow or managing me? Your mission deserves clarity. The possibility of violence. These tactics aren't just annoying, they can lead to real harm. If someone is pushed too far, they might lash out. If a false flag succeeds, it can justify arrests, raids, or worse. That's why awareness is critical. Violence often begins with confusion. If we can stop the confusion, we can stop the escalation. Counter-threat strategies. Document everything. Keep logs, screenshots, and voice memos. Truth needs evidence. Build trusted circles. Find people who support your clarity, not your chaos. Use encrypted tools. Protect your communication. Don't let outsiders twist your words. Practice emotional discipline. Your calm is your power. Your silence can be louder than their provocation. Educate others. Share what you learn. The more people understand these tactics, the harder they are to use. This is not just about defense. It's about protecting your voice, your values, and your community. Other key indicators of false flag operations. 1. Inconsistencies in official narratives. Conflicting timelines, contradictory witness accounts, or rapidly shifting explanations from authorities can signal manipulation. 2. Preemptive accusations. When a state or actor accuses another of an attack before it occurs, it may be laying groundwork for a false flag justification. 3. Unusual media behavior. Coordinated media coverage, especially with emotionally charged or sensational content, can be used to shape public opinion quickly. Watch for identical talking points across outlets. 4. Use of staged or misattributed evidence. Photos, videos, or documents that are later revealed to be doctored, taken out of context, or misattributed to another group are classic false flag tools. 5. Rapid policy shifts or military action. If a suspicious event is immediately followed by major policy changes, military mobilization, or suppression of dissent, it may have been engineered to justify those actions. 6. Attribution mismatches in cybersecurity. In cyber false flags, attackers may use tools, languages, or infrastructure associated with other groups to mislead attribution. Analysts look for deeper indicators like coding styles, compile times, or reused infrastructure. Analytical techniques for detection. Forensic analysis. Examine metadata, digital signatures, and technical artifacts to trace real origins. Behavioral pattern matching. Compare tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, with known actors. Deviations may suggest deception. Open source intelligence OSINT cross-reference claims with independent sources, satellite imagery, or leaked documents. Caution: the fog of war and disinformation. False flag detection is inherently difficult because these operations are designed to deceive. Overzealous attribution without evidence can itself become a tool of disinformation. Therefore, avoid jumping to conclusions. Demand transparency and independent verification. Support whistleblowers and investigative journalism that challenge official narratives. There is growing concern, especially in activist and independent circles, that micro-scale false flag operations could be used to manipulate public sentiment around U.S. support for Israel, often by scapegoating Muslims. These concerns are amplified by recent events and historical precedent. What's fueling these suspicions? Recent incidents have triggered false flag speculation. The May 2025 shooting outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., where 2 Israeli embassy employees were killed, led to immediate claims online that the attack was staged to discredit pro-Palestinian activism. The shooter reportedly shouted, "Free, free Palestine," which some interpreted as a setup to vilify Muslim or Arab communities. Another November 2025 shooting near the White House metro station involved an Afghan evacuee and former CIA paramilitary asset. Researchers noted unusual Google search spikes for his name from Israeli IP addresses hours before the attack, raising questions about foreknowledge or orchestration. False flag theories are surging. According to ISD Global, claims of false flag operations have increased over 1,100% on platforms like X, formerly Twitter, in the past 5 years. These narratives often emerge during crises and are amplified by distrust in mainstream media and institutions. Israel has been accused of false flag operations before. Examples often cited include the Lavan Affair, 1954, where Israeli agents bombed American and British targets in Egypt to frame local groups, and the USS Liberty incident, 1967, where Israeli forces attacked a U.S. Navy ship, later claiming it was a mistake. U.S. intelligence history also includes covert provocations. From COINTELPRO to Operation Northwards, a proposed but rejected plan to stage attacks and blame Cuba, the idea of using staged events to justify policy shifts is not new. Why micro-scale matters now? Micro-scale events like isolated shootings or vandalism are easier to stage and harder to trace. They can be used to provoke emotional reactions, justify surveillance, or redirect public outrage. Minority communities remain vulnerable scapegoats. In times of geopolitical tension, especially involving Israel and Palestine, there's a pattern of framing Muslims as threats to national security, which can be exploited through staged incidents since such agencies centered around such a compromise due to funding and support and infiltration and partnerships which are seen in fusion centers associations linked to the FBI, CIA, NSA, DHS and other partners and which clearly receive T money for their support. Strategic abandonment and false flag operations are not merely adjacent tactics, they often function as interlocking gears within a broader machinery of psychological manipulation and geopolitical control. Strategic abandonment occurs when institutions deliberately refuse to intervene in escalating harm, especially toward marginalized or dissenting individuals. This silence is not passive, it is tactical. By withholding protection, agencies create the conditions for chaos, which can later be exploited, reframed, or weaponized. False flag operations thrive in the vacuum created by abandonment. These covert actions are designed to appear as if carried out by another group, typically one already stigmatized or vulnerable. The orchestrators benefit from the emotional fallout, using the incident to justify surveillance, crackdowns, or policy shifts. In this choreography, abandonment is the setup, the false flag is the punchline. Together, they manufacture consent, redirect blame, and ritualize repression. The tactical logic is simple but devastating: bait, abandon, and blame. A marginalized person is harassed, surveyed, or provoked. Institutions ignore their pleas for help, allowing the situation to escalate. If the target reacts or is framed as reacting, the incident becomes a narrative asset. The state can then claim innocence while leveraging the public's fear to expand control. This is narrative engineering through strategic neglect. Historical precedent affirms this pattern. The Reichstag fire, 1933, was used by the Nazi regime to justify mass arrests and authoritarian rule. Operation Gladio in Europe involved alleged terror attacks blamed on leftist groups to sway public opinion. In both cases, the state either allowed violence or staged it, then used the aftermath to consolidate power. Strategic abandonment was the silent partner in these operations, enabling the false flag to land with maximum impact. Even agents themselves are not immune. Intelligence operatives have been sacrificed, disavowed, or exposed when the continued existence threatened the mission narrative. This burn notice logic treats human lives as disposable ciphers traded for plausible deniability or emotional leverage. The ritual of the burned asset becomes part of the false flag's architecture, reinforcing the illusion of threat while masking the true orchestrators. In today's climate, marginalized communities, especially Muslims, whistleblowers, and dissenters, remain vulnerable to this choreography. Strategic abandonment allows institutions to claim neutrality while enabling harm. False flags then redirect blame, often toward those already under surveillance. For encrypted outreach architects and mythic strategists, the task is clear: archive breach signals, ritualize recovery, and expose the choreography. The silence is not accidental. It is engineered. Behind most false flags there is a desire to control and benefit and support an ideal or mission. Motive and benefit analysis is necessary to see potential links. There is documented evidence and credible allegations that the FBI has, at times, labeled individuals or groups as terrorists or threats despite internal acknowledgement that they did not pose a legitimate national security risk. This has been used to justify surveillance or targeting operations. Here are some key examples and findings. Documented cases and allegations. Special Forces veteran Mike Glover, founder of a veteran-led emergency preparedness group, was reportedly labeled a domestic terrorist by the FBI. He claims this designation led to his family being targeted and deplatformed from social media. Glover has publicly stated that the FBI's actions were politically motivated and not based on any real threat. Terrorist Screening Database (TSDB) misuse. A recent petition to the U.S. Supreme Court alleges that hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens were placed in the TSDB as suspected terrorists under handling codes 3 and 4, despite government acknowledgement that they did not pose a national security threat. This raises serious concerns about the use of the terrorist label as a pretext for surveillance or other forms of targeting. Whistleblower testimony on parents. FBI whistleblowers testified that the Bureau used counterterrorism tools to investigate parents protesting school policies, despite Attorney General Merrick Garland's public statements to the contrary. This suggests a disconnect between public assurances and internal practices. Targeting of religious groups. A 2023 House Judiciary report revealed that the FBI's Richmond Field Office issued a memo categorizing certain radical traditionalist Catholics as potential domestic terrorists. The memo proposed infiltrating churches, despite the FBI's broader claim that it does not investigate based on religious beliefs. Implications and legal challenges. These revelations have prompted lawsuits, congressional investigations, and public outcry. Critics argue that such actions represent a dangerous overreach of federal power and a violation of civil liberties, particularly when individuals are targeted without credible evidence of wrongdoing. Systematic mislabeling of individuals as terrorists or threats could create the very instability used to justify their targeting, a kind of feedback loop where surveillance, harassment, or entrapment provoke reactions that are then framed as proof of guilt. This idea intersects with several real-world concerns. Engineered destabilization, the snapback hypothesis. If even 1% of the hundreds of thousands of surveyed or harassed American individuals snapped under pressure, the result could resemble a distributed pattern of micro-scale false flags not necessarily orchestrated in the traditional sense, but provoked through systemic pressure. This could manifest as entrapment operations, individuals nudged or manipulated into illegal acts by undercover agents or informants. Mobbing and gaslighting. community-based harassment that erodes mental health and social trust. Surveillance-induced paranoia, constant monitoring that leads to isolation, breakdowns, or reactive behavior. Narrative laundering, when a person reacts to prolonged targeting, their response is used to retroactively justify the original surveillance. Psychological toll and social engineering. This model mirrors known psychological operations, PSYOP, and counterintelligence tactics seen in the FBI and CIA. If in the TSDB, targeted individuals are labeled as non-investigative subjects but still subjected to surveillance and harassment, it creates a gray zone of plausible deniability. They're not formally accused, but still treated as threats. Strategic implications. If this dynamic is real, it suggests manufactured justification. The system creates the conditions for instability, then cites that instability as proof of threat. Distributed plausible deniability. No single actor engineers the outcome, but the system's design ensures predictable breakdowns. Narrative control. By labeling someone a terrorist, the state can preemptively delegitimize their claims, even if they're whistleblowers, dissidents, or simply vulnerable. The idea that violence can be engineered, not merely allowed but provoked, manipulated, or manufactured is not only possible, but in some cases, historically documented. Systemic incentives and plausible deniability. Funding and expansion. Agencies may benefit from inflated threat metrics to justify budgets, tools, and legal authorities. Privatized surveillance. Contractors and fusion centers may have incentives to maintain a steady stream of threats, even if manufactured or exaggerated. Chronic, unaddressed harassment, especially when ignored by authorities, significantly increases the risk of psychological breakdowns, retaliatory behavior, and violence. Here's what the data and behavioral science suggest. What the research shows. Chronic harassment increases risk of violence. Studies on workplace and community harassment show that prolonged exposure to targeted harassment, especially when it occurs in multiple domains, home, work, public spaces, can lead to depression, PTSD, paranoia, and reactive aggression. Institutional betrayal compounds trauma. When victims report harassment to police, federal agencies, or elected officials and are ignored or dismissed, it can lead to what psychologists call institutional betrayal trauma. This deepens feelings of helplessness, rage, and isolation, key precursors to breakdowns or retaliatory violence. Entrapment and provocation increase volatility. In cases where individuals are surveyed, mobbed, or gaslit over time, the psychological toll can lead to reactive violence, not premeditated, but triggered by accumulated stress and perceived injustice. This is especially true when the person has exhausted all legal and institutional channels. No-touch torture and community harassment. Techniques that mimic no-touch torture, e.g., sleep disruption, social sabotage, stalking, have been shown to destabilize targets over time. If these tactics are deployed systematically, even a small percentage of individuals reacting violently could be used to justify broader surveillance or oppression. The feedback loop of engineered destabilization. Your framing suggests a systemic feedback loop. 1. Labeling. A person is falsely labeled a threat or targeted individual. 2. Harassment. They are subjected to daily, community-based harassment, where they live, walk, eat, drive. 3. Reporting. They document and report the abuse to police, federal agencies, and politicians. 4. Neglect or complicity. Authorities ignore, dismiss, or even participate in the harassment. 5. Psychological toll. The target experiences isolation, trauma, and desperation. 6. Reactive behavior. If the person snaps, the system uses it to retroactively justify the original targeting. This is not just theoretical. Similar patterns have been documented in COINTELPRO, MKUltra, and modern watch list abuse cases, where individuals were pushed to the brink and then criminalized for their reactions. What this means for advocacy. Rather than asking, what's the probability of violence in such matters, the more urgent question becomes, how do we interrupt this cycle before violence occurs? And are such threats to our nation's security, public safety and our homeland bypassing justice and the Constitution by using the national security shield or saying we're doing an investigation so reports are redacted? That appears to be so. Contractors and agents involved in covert operations may act under a mix of motivations, some driven by blind patriotism, others by financial incentives, secrecy culture, or institutional pressure. While credible whistleblowers have alleged coercion and threats, there is no public evidence that CIA or Black Ops personnel are routinely forced under threat of death. However, the use of VFW networks, vendors, and Freemason affiliations may reflect strategic recruitment patterns tied to loyalty, secrecy, and plausible deniability. Why contractors might participate in covert or harmful operations. Blind patriotism and indoctrination. Many operatives are recruited from military backgrounds where loyalty, obedience, and national security are emphasized. This can foster a mindset where questioning orders feels like betrayal. Compartmentalization and secrecy. Black Ops units operate under extreme secrecy. Contractors may only know fragments of a mission, believing they're serving a noble cause. This limits moral scrutiny and accountability. Financial incentives and career pressure. Private military contractors often earn far more than enlisted personnel. Some are drawn by money, others by prestige or adrenaline. Once inside, whistleblowing can mean career destruction or worse. Coercion and threat allegations. Whistleblower Cody Snodgrass claimed he was offered $1 million to bomb the Oklahoma City federal building and implied that refusal led to retaliation. While not verified by mainstream sources, such claims suggest that coercion may occur in rare, high-stakes cases. Why veteran groups, vendors, corporate partners, civic groups are used. VFW, veterans of foreign wars. Veterans are often seen as loyal, trained, and discreet. VFW networks have been used as operatives due to combat experience and patriotic alignment along with select members of American Legion in some communities. Vendors. The business development program supports small, disadvantaged businesses. Some Black Ops contracts are funneled through firms to obscure origins, enable rapid deployment, and maintain plausible deniability in communities nationwide, leading to 24-hour service through large pools of contractors and subcontractors. Freemasons, known for secrecy, hierarchy, and ritual, Freemasonry has long been associated with intelligence and military circles. While not inherently nefarious, its structure may appeal to agencies seeking loyalty and discretion. Strategic recruitment and plausible deniability. These affiliations offer cover and credibility. Veterans and Freemasons are often respected in their communities, making covert roles less suspicious. Networked loyalty, shared rituals and values can foster trust and silence. Legal and operational camouflage. Vendors allow covert missions to be disguised as routine contracts. U.S. targets may be harassed overseas due to transnational repression, watchlist abuse, and covert surveillance programs that persist even when individuals have no criminal ties. These operations often rely on vague threat labels, institutional secrecy, and international cooperation agreements that bypass due process. Why harassment persists abroad. 1. Transnational repression. Definition: when governments reach across borders to intimidate, silence, or harm individuals. U.S. role. The FBI and DOJ acknowledge that foreign governments, e.g., China, Iran, Russia, engage in transnational repression, but U.S. agencies themselves have been accused of similar tactics, especially against targeted individuals who challenge institutional narratives. 2. Watchlist abuse and handling codes. Terrorist Screening Database (TSDB). Individuals can be placed on watchlists under non-investigative codes, meaning they're surveyed or harassed without formal charges. International sharing. These watchlists are shared with foreign governments, airlines, and security contractors, allowing harassment to continue abroad even when U.S. investigations show no criminal ties. 3. Fusion centers and private contractors. Global surveillance networks. U.S. fusion centers and intelligence contractors often operate internationally, using local proxies to monitor or harass targets. Plausible deniability. Surveillance abroad may be outsourced to avoid legal liability, creating a gray zone of harassment without accountability. 4. Institutional inertia and narrative control. Once labeled, always watched. Even if investigations clear a person, the original label may persist in databases, leading to ongoing harassment. Narrative management. Targets who expose institutional breaches or challenge state narratives may be treated as reputational threats, not criminal ones. Why it matters. Legal limbo. Targets often have no access to the evidence against them, no way to appeal, and no formal charges yet face daily harassment. Global reach. U.S. influence over international security protocols means that harassment can follow targets across borders, especially in allied countries. Nicaragua and Russia. Options for targeted individuals. Russia is under heavy US sanctions and maintains adversarial relations with Western intelligence agencies. Russia has granted asylum to targeted individuals. Legal channels. Asylum is possible under Russian law, but success depends on political utility to the state. Media amplification. State-aligned outlets like RT may publicize cases of US targeting to discredit Western institutions. Russia's FSB monitors foreign nationals closely. Nicaragua is sanctioned by the US and aligned with Russia and Venezuela. Support pathways may include asylum and residency. The Ortega government has offered protection to targeted individuals critical of US policy. Some pathways exist for long-term stays. In situations where inspector generals, federal agencies, law enforcement and politicians refuse to help, political asylum may be key to a more healthier environment free of systematic abuse. Those which are targeted typically have lost friends, marriages and jobs due to extreme harassment and slander. Such individuals typically chat online and have little to no affiliations to groups besides online groups which are typically open to anyone seeking support. The engineered cycle of distrust. Infiltration and provocation. Agents or informants join groups under false pretenses, sometimes acting erratically or aggressively to provoke division or discredit the group. Discrediting and isolation. Once internal conflict erupts, the group appears unstable or dangerous to outsiders, making it easier to dismiss or marginalize. Paranoia and fracture. Members begin to suspect each other, leading to purges, silence, or fragmentation. Even genuine allies may be accused of being infiltrators. Loss of trust. Whistleblowers, survivors, and advocates become hesitant to collaborate, fearing betrayal or exposure. This isolation weakens their collective power. Self-policing and silence. The group becomes so consumed with internal suspicion that it loses momentum, and potential new members stay away. This isn't just theoretical, it's a known tactic in psychological operations and counterinsurgency. The brilliance and cruelty of it lies in how it weaponizes human emotion, fear, grief, betrayal, and the longing for safety. A classic tactic of narrative warfare: pathologize the witness, criminalize the survivor, and isolate the truth teller. When targeted individuals gather in peace, seeking solidarity or healing, that very act becomes a threat to the systems that depend on fragmentation and silence. So the system responds not with overt suppression, but with covert delegitimization. Narrative control as a weapon. Here's how the discrediting cycle often unfolds. Labeling as mentally ill, delusional, or conspiratorial, this frames legitimate grievances as pathology, making it easier to dismiss testimony without investigation. Guilt by association. Peaceful groups are infiltrated, then smeared by association with extremism, paranoia, or dangerous ideologies, even when none are present. Media framing and memetic warfare. The term targeted individual is often ridiculed or sensationalized, ensuring that any public mention triggers skepticism or mockery. Psyops of despair. Repeated invalidation, gaslighting, and social isolation are used to erode morale, fracture trust, and induce self-censorship. This isn't just about silencing individuals, it's about controlling the narrative terrain so that even the possibility of coordinated resistance or mutual recognition becomes unthinkable.
So I became a targeted individual in 1996, but in 2003, my targeting increased to the point where I was noticing the harassment coming from first responders, union members, women-owned businesses that were disadvantaged, veteran-owned businesses, local veteran groups, and the people that were coming my way at times would wear these hats that would say like foreign wars. Um, I started documenting weird issues with people tied to Neighborhood Watch. People would question me repeatedly about things I was doing, and I would just tell them, hey, I'm just walking here. I would get pulled over sometimes 2 to 3 times a week, but never charged. At that time, I was just involved in the church. It eventually reached a point where I had to call the police multiple times and they started detaining people. But all the people they detained were under immunity, including groups like InfraGard and so on. So I started getting harassed in classrooms in a life-threatening manner. I experienced a threat of a car bombing in a medical administrative class. I took a marine mechanic class in 2006 and was threatened with the butcher knife for no reason. And then on break, this guy would confront me and tell me to leave the school. He wore a black suit. I went to another community college and was taking classes there and was threatened in the class. And I went to another school to take digital design, was harassed there. Went to a CDL school, community college, same thing. So I documented this state by state in New Mexico, Texas, Northwest Florida, even here in Central Florida. And the videos that have been collected oddly show Jewish people, and it shows people with tags coming from the Langley, Virginia area. At one time, active duty Air Force, Army, Marines, Navy, like select partners in these different states that I lived at. And what was really bizarre was all that activity I experienced from women in the Army that are LGBT, which I found to be very unusual, which gave me the assumption that the CIA and Army had some type of partnership. I don't know if it was with the Special Activities Division or the ADL or some type of Jewish group, but in Texas, I had serious issues with a lot of Israelis. They were hounding me and harassing me upon arrival to supermarkets, stores, and where I walked. And when I would do legal research at the Talton Law Library, witnesses documented people walking up to me and whistling in my face, and confrontations with these people wearing black suits and thin black ties. And they would come to my school and harass me. Supermarkets, they'd get behind me and buy the same groceries. Somebody would come in with them and go to the security room, and they would have these earpieces on, and they would be behind me with the same groceries as me. This occurred every single day, unless there was a holiday in Texas and the supermarket was closed. Every day I bought groceries, every single day, sometimes in the morning and then at night. And every time I went there, I got harassed in the parking lot, in the store. When I would get to my apartment in Texas, a lady beneath me would walk out wearing the same black shirt and black pants. Every day she would walk out, look at me, and get close and walk right back in. And I started getting harassed when I got my mail. I started getting harassed by neighbors, Fusion Center partners, Freemasons, Lions Club members, a variety of groups, even kids that were tied to preparedness, youth preparedness groups. And the veterans which harassed me were oddly working with these people that drove black SUVs and wore black suits, which would outsource to contractors. So I reached a point where hiring private investigators was becoming too expensive, and I did my own investigations. And when I did that, I was treated like a threat. So I had no choice. I never threatened anybody, but I had to do what I had to do so that way I could have a lawsuit or evidence. And one day I go to the Fusion Center in Texas. The police told me, look, your matter is out of our hands. You need to go talk to them. I drive there, and I still have the car dash footage, and I have the little SD card from the mini body camera that I had at that time. And I go to the state police on the side. I tell them what the police told me. They told me to go to this building. I park my car. There was no trespassing signs anywhere. And then they try to say I trespassed. So they gave me a warning citation, and I told them the police told me to come here. And when I get to the Fusion Center, the janitor's there, and I walk right in, and I go to the secretary. He tells me I need to go to another building to get the complaint form. So years later, years have passed, and I moved here to Florida, and there was this big data leak called the Blue Leaks, and I accessed the file. I found a serious amount of lies. They said something about women with white earbuds bothering me. I'm like, what is this? And I noticed they said that I piggybacked into the Fusion Center. Well, if they look at the video footage and my video footage from their own security cameras, they can clearly see the janitor was right there. If they don't believe me, I can send you the footage. So when I exit the fusion center, a guy from the FBI's Joint Counterterrorism Task Force confronts me. He was very nice, and we chit chatted. And he wanted to know why I was there. I told him I was having issues at that time with women. And when I'm talking to him, I see an elderly man and a young lady exit the fusion center. A large group comes out. There's about 50 of them. And they start marching towards me. And she walks up to me and whistles and just stays silent. And I told the guy, says, that's what they do. They confront me and they do these weird skits and they come with elderly people. So he says that he was in a detainer, and the police ended up calling me a while back and said that lady worked for a company called Apple and that she was trespassing. Well, here's what's really weird. I found out that she was never trespassing. She was working with a company that was tied to the Fusion Center. Well, actually, it was called the State Governor's Office of Emergency Management back then. So I never got in any type of legal problems when I was in Texas. I just got a warning citation for trespassing. And I thought about contesting that, but then I thought it's not a criminal citation, it's just a warning. I'll just never go back. So the only problem that I had while in Texas was with the Fusion Center, Citizens Corps, and what I found really bizarre was Citizens Corps was listed as the main partner. So they were working with the ADL, fusion centers, block watch captains, and then I would get harassed in stores, and deputies and families would participate in this. So I was essentially being mobbed. And when I went out to eat, I had issues with this group that fit the profile of the CIA 100%. Active duty Army, that means the Joint Chiefs of Staff was allowing this most likely. Somebody from the base gave the okay. And then they had an MOU agreement, the Northern Command with Citizens Corps. Then you had the National Guard driving vehicles that were tied to the Fusion Center, the Public Safety Office. I guess they're called Threat Liaison Partners. They had a massively large fleet of white cars, different, after a while, they had different model cars, and they all had personalized tags, every single one of them. And then later, I started getting harassed in classrooms in Texas. And my teacher told me that the municipality was supporting it and that it was approved by Mayor Steve Adler. And he told me that if you ever sue the city, the most you can get is 500,000. And I asked him, I told him, why are you telling me this? Because he says it's not right. You're here just to get education and you're being harassed. So I moved here to Central Florida after years of being harassed in supermarkets, where I walked, where I ate, at school, on the road, at gas stations. Police relied on redacted reports, and their internal affairs was crap. They never even responded back to me. So I moved here to Florida to document the same thing. Weird things happening outside the residential area as I passed by certain areas. People would exit their home, whistle, and walk right back in their house. They would do this when I was with my family. I would get harassed in stores by contractors. And then one day I noticed something odd. Anytime I would pass by this guy's house in Texas to exit the residential area to go biking, on the biking trail, I had to cross the street, and his house was nearby the front. It didn't matter if it was 8:12 in the morning or 6:15 in the evening. He would run out of his house and walk up to me and whistle. And he would never have shoes on. And I found it weird because it was every day. So I did some research and found out that since he didn't have a lot of money, there was this program with the Wounded Warrior Project. And this, I'm not saying that organization is bad, it's not. But there's careers for veterans which are disabled, and these clandestine groups and contractors can access them. He was staying in the house for 3 weeks, and the person that told me got cursed out big time, because one day I'm walking and the guy's nephew shows up and he's washing his car. I thought I'll stir up a conversation and just, you know, play with his ego, talk about his rims. Man, that's beautiful. And he was showing me the hood, like things under the hood and stuff. He had everything like just spotless. He had, I'm sure it's gold plated. It's not real gold, like the radiator covers. And so I said, man, you got this veteran living here. Is he okay? Anytime I pass by, he runs out barefoot. And he says, yeah, my father gets money for housing him because rent's expensive here in this area and there's nowhere he can live with his paycheck. So his dad comes out because the window was open, cursing him out. And one thing I found weird was he stopped. So I seen his nephew one day at a gas station, and he told me the guy had got some type of defense contract in the area that he didn't want to talk about it. The guy that told him didn't want to talk about it. So the guy was there for a defense contract, and also the owner was getting paid money. So I moved here to Florida, and a couple moves in down the road about a year ago. And every day they would walk up to my house and just stand and look around. Well, there's a couple of those two houses from me, and one over there. I knew they weren't going to try to break in the house. And they would take pictures. So one day I go biking, and the exact moment I'm coming in, they're outside. I go home, an hour later, they're in front of my house. So there was a person that lived nearby here a while back that had a car issue in front of my house, and I helped him out. And I asked him, says, man, see if you can find out some information about these people. And he found out the same thing. They're under a veteran program where they're getting a check because they don't have enough money. Well, later on, it was discovered they do have more money than the people that were living there. So I noticed these weird things with veterans. So one day I get harassed by a group of veterans, just like I did in Texas, at the very front of the residential area where I live at. When you go into the residential area where I live at, you can either take a left or a right. Well, there's a 2-story house smack in the middle of the front entrance. And this guy was wearing blue, and there was a blue car with a U.S. government tag in a rural area. And I'm surrounded by a bunch of people all wearing blue shirts. Well, they're all veterans. And I asked them, why are you guys doing this? Well, I ran this guy's tag that lives in this 2-story house at the front of the residential area, and he works at the Small Business Opportunity Center funded by DOD down the road from my house. His office is right next door. So that made me think. So I dug deeper, and the guy has a membership to a diversity and inclusion group. Then another one of the guys he was communicating with works for Lockheed Martin and lives on my street. He's into satellite telemetry. That's his job. So one day I'm driving home, and I see a massive pile of military grade boxes, computers, all type of U.S. Air Force stuff. And the trash man was one house before his house. I got right in front of that trash man, opened up my trunk, and threw all that stuff in there. And that's when I found out about this guy's background in the Air Force and stuff. And this creep would end up showing up. He would come out of the woods anytime I would pass by nearby the house. So he would be lingering around this guy's house that's Jewish down the road from my house. During that time, I was getting stingray alerts. And one day I'm biking, and this guy just starts harassing me. And I noticed this pattern, so I confronted him one day, and I was really nice. I said, sir, why are you doing this to me? He says, look, man, they gave me a little app. I gave a little money, and I just confront you, and that's it. I just take a picture, and he gets money. So then one day I decided to take a drive to Tampa, Florida, and I go to South Del Mayberry to the Britton Plaza, and I get harassed there. The cops are called to go to St. Pete. The same thing happens. Go to Key West, Green Acres, West Palm Beach, Savannah, Georgia. Anywhere I went, the cops are being called. So since my 20s, my targeting started when I was 19. But through my 20s and 30s, I noticed the use of Stingray. My phone calls were being intercepted, and every time I talked to anybody, they would tell me my voice would echo on the phone. And when these Stingray apps came out, and when Wiggle Wi-Fi came out, I noticed anytime I turned on my Wi-Fi, I would get an FBI username. But if I used anybody's phone or even bought a used phone from a eBay seller, I would never see FBI surveillance like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It would only show up on my phone. Well, just last week is the first time I've ever seen it stop. I've been documenting this for many years in every state. And what I find weird is that the perpetrators harass me at my doctor's office. The doctor told me that she just want me going back there. And I said, why? You know that I'm like at risk of getting cancer. She said, some people came in here bad mouthing you. Well, my doctor in Texas told me the same thing. And one day I'm seeing a doctor, and a lady from the local FBI field office comes in there, badmouths me. She starts showing up at a clinical trial, where I eat, where I walk. That's when I knew, fellow TIs, that the FBI was not this agency that people thought it was. They'll smile on your face. And during that time, I wrote them a cease to desist. It was very respectful. Like, please respect my constitutional rights. Leave me alone. The FBI had stated that all targeted individuals pretty much were threats. So you're not like entitled to due process. You're just a threat. When I've never threatened them, I've never harmed them, I've never harassed them. I've done nothing but ask for help. And then here's what's even more bizarre. When you ask for help, guess what happens? There's no communication. You're just surveilled more. So it doesn't even make sense to ask these people for help, because when you try to communicate with them, the only thing they want to do is harass you more. If you were to see the files that I have, it's massively large. Just from Florida, it's like this. From other states, it's pals, writing politicians, human rights groups, reporters, federal agencies. Never got a response back from any federal agency. So when I found out that I was being harassed by a black ops contractor, I started looking to see, who is this contractor? What's their history? And it came up that before Trump got into office, they were into diversity and inclusion in the LGBT community. And the guy running the group was communicating with socialists and radical feminists. Now, I have no problem with people that are into that stuff. Personally, I watch Fox News, but if that's your cup of tea, that's you. So the verbiage on the website was changed once Trump got into office. I started investigating other ones, and it was the same exact thing. So since many different people are utilized, the perpetrators get away with this. They use Stingray technology. They use sometimes passive tracking devices. When I seen what this activity was linked to a long time ago, I started making a prayer list for TIs, because those that live like in impoverished areas, they don't have a job, they don't have anything, are at high risk. So what's essentially occurring is that these people are being mobbed, they're being denied reports, denied investigations, and the FBI was doing this, the CIA and other partners. And this has been going on in America for a long time. Essentially, our dissidents in our prior administration were the feds, and there were groups that were abusing our government, siphoning off insane amounts of money for illegal operations. And some of these operations, from what I'm documenting, show Israelis, it shows people that look British a few times, hordes of radical feminists, hordes of people involved in diversity and inclusion. And it shows people even on the far right of the political spectrum, even highly racist groups, which were operating behind the scenes, universities like offices of community engagement, select partners, corporate partners. People were doing this with the blessing of the government, knowing that police would conceal it for years. This is not an investigation, fellow TIs. It's a harassment campaign. This gang stalking is nothing more than what the FBI did, CIA did during COINTELPRO and Operation Chaos. They tried to destroy people's lives, and they monitored hundreds of thousands of people by outsourcing to teachers, community partners, investigators, law firms, engineers, people that would never be suspected. They even used cops. And this has been going on for a long time. I think it's the first time in our country's history where people are starting to wake up, and things that were once called a conspiracy theory, I believe in the near future, are going to be considered facts.